The following is a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
Welcome to the System is Down.
Hey, happy Monday, everyone. And what makes it happy, you ask? The fact that I get to be here doing this with you, talking to you about uncomfortable topics, things that make you stir a little bit in your seat, things that, that should be talked about, but most people feel uncomfortable talking about them. Welcome to The System is Down. If you're new here, this is the place where we talk about all the uncomfortable things like conspiracies, politics, and religion, things that are usually off the table for most casual conversations. We just talk about them in a very matter-of-fact manner, in a very civil manner, and explore different ideas of thought in the universe and things that are going on. My name is Dan Smots. I am the host of this show, and I thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Go find the person who invited you, give him a big hashtag #MeToo, slap on the rear, and kiss on the lips. Big sloppy one from me and from you, because, you're going to enjoy it. You're going to enjoy it, and I know you're going to enjoy it because today's episode is my conversation with Jed Payne, a.k.a. P. Master Jeddy from Church and Other Drugs. He came on to share his story about addiction. He's got quite a fascinating story. Basically should be made into a movie. It's got quite the arc. Much more fascinating story than a lot of people in the world. Much more interesting than mine, personally. But I had no idea what we were getting into when the conversation started. I didn't know his full story at all. I just knew that he had, experiences with some drugs, and he had a lot to say on addiction. And I've been on his podcast before, and he's a really cool guy, so I wanted to have him on to talk about that. And as things unfolded, as he told his story, I found out really quickly that there's a lot more to it than I anticipated. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. I think it's something that is, it's fascinating what the human body can take and what people can overcome. It speaks a lot to the human condition, and I think that a lot of people can relate to some of the things that Jed has gone through. Some of the things you probably can't relate to, but the fact that he's gone through them, made it out alive, is miraculous, and the fact that he's super open and honest and willing to share it is very applaudable. And so we'll get into that here in just a moment. Before we do, I got to remind you guys about the Downers Club. The Downers Club is what keeps this show growing, getting bigger and better, more beautiful. It's our Patreon. We are still on Patreon for the time being because we need Patreon more than Patreon needs us. And you leaving to boycott Patreon would only hurt me. It would not hurt Patreon because they're not getting very much money from me. But if you like the show, if you want to support what we're doing here, and if you want to get bonus episodes of the show every single week, you can go over to patreon.com/thesystemsdown and sign up for as little as $5 a month. And yeah, like I said, you'll get bonus audio and video of the show weekly, and it's a lot of fun. And you'll be a part of this community that we are creating where we just talk frankly and be civil with each other about things that other people have a hard time talking about. So check that out, patreon.com/thesystemsdown. And there's a bunch of fun perks in there that you can check out as well. So that's it for the plugs. All right, let's jump into this. This is my conversation with Jed Payne of Church and Other Drugs. Let's get weird. My guest today is the host of the podcast Church and Other Drugs, P. Master Jeddy, a.k.a. Jed Payne. Jed, how's it going, man?
It's going well, man. How are you doing?
I am doing splendidly, aside from the personal things that we talked about before getting on here that, I'll air that all out later on in the future. But I feel like you and I have a lot in common, and I've been on your show, and we've chatted back and forth about a few things. But I want to get some of your background. I want to talk to you about addiction and stuff like that, because you seem to have a good grasp on some things based on, the title Church and Other Drugs. But so
Indeed.
Let's start off. Just tell everybody a little bit about your podcast and what you do over there.
Yeah, so it's funny. I've been asked this recently too, and I realized I've never really come up with a concise like mission statement. So our podcast was kind of born out of our original co-host, who's kind of taken a back seat. Me and him were friends in middle school when we used to get high together, and we kind of drifted apart. He ended up getting sober, and I went farther down the spiral. So for about 5 years, he was always trying to get me to get sober, and I like flew to California to live with him to try to clean up, and finally it clicked for me. And so we're both Christians, and we were both members of AA. And so you can't really talk about any specific religion in AA. Sure. And then we also realized that church would be a lot better off if it modeled itself after AA, and a lot of like the rawness and the like confession and sin focus. And so we were like, well, let's start a podcast and talk about that little niche, I guess, that we thought at the time. And plus, I've been to tons and tons of rehab centers all across the country. So I've met tons of people with just the most ridiculous and awesome stories. And I was like, those stories need to get told. So that's pretty much how that came about. We kind of split our episodes between people telling their stories. Not everyone's even sober. Some of them are still out there getting high. Sure. People that deal with different types of addictions. Then we'll talk about conspiracies and theology. And, we had a dude that is convinced the Bible is littered with DMT references.
I like it.
Yeah. Just and then it's also been kind of like my real-time therapy.
Sure.
Which is the best part. In addition to being an alcoholic drug addict, I have depression and anxiety and PTSD and all sorts of stuff. So it's just been cool, man. It's lighthearted, it's funny, but we also, it turned into we actually apparently are helping some people out there, which is cool.
Yeah,
added bonus.
Over the course of this time, like, have you felt it easier to cope with your past issues? Like, have you been surprised to see how many people have come forward and been willing to be transparent about this type of thing?
Yes. And also the cool thing is almost every guest, if I'll have a guest on unrelated to addiction, somewhere along the conversation, I will find out that they somehow tie into addiction, or they relate to it, or they have a family member or something like that. So yeah, it's been really cool finding all that out. The response has been good.
Yeah. So what kind of drugs are we talking in your past? Was it just weed? Was it just alcohol?
Yeah, so I smoked a joint once, and that was it, man. No,
you felt guilty enough to start a podcast because
absolutely
smoked that devil lettuce.
Became an expert on addiction.
That's right.
No, so I guess my absolute go-to was opiates. I was an IV heroin addict, but I also was into shooting up crystal meth, and I was a IV cocaine addict for a number of years. Really anything and everything. I kind of took my turns being addicted to everything.
Sure.
Benzos, Xanax. I had a long history with research chemicals and hallucinogens, LSD, mushrooms. I was really a chemical hobbyist. So I like really, like any good addict, I get obsessed about things. And so when I used my powers towards being obsessed with drugs, it was off to the races.
Sure. What kind of got you started down this path of, experimenting with all these things?
Yeah. So as a kid, they say that, you are an alcoholic and addict before you ever touch a drug. And in my own history, I would say that is true. So the definition has kind of changed over time. The most recent is substance use disorder. It's a disease of the brain, similar to like an obsessive type thing where, getting fixated over stuff and So as a kid, I would switch between. I had a very active imagination. I was very sensitive, very empathetic, and my first addiction was like toys and comic books and action figures and stuff. And I would live in this fantasy world, and I always had to have more. There was never enough. And I tried beer first. I tried weed first. Didn't really do much for me. My first experience where I was like, holy shit, I want to devote my life to this was when it was the summer of my 10th grade year, and me and some friends, my buddy John that I started the podcast with, we tripped on Coricidin cough and cold for the first time, which is dextromethorphan, which is a sister drug of ketamine and PCP. Yeah, and that experience blew my mind. I didn't know that those experiences were possible. And it was, you can say the demon entered at that night, because I was like, oh my God, I want to do this. And at first, I very much fell for the lie of the romanticized drug addicted artist thing. Like,
sure.
We started watching Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. We watched Requiem for a Dream. I had a notebook that I wrote all the drugs I had tried. Very, very immature way to look at it. Like, I was just young and experimenting. And I did have like actual depression, but then, going up and down on drugs so much just made it much worse. And
sure,
I should have known it was bad. I had my first overdose when I was 15 on Benadryl, actually. Yikes. That was my first hospitalization and my first time getting put in an outpatient treatment center. But still, at the time, it was just kind of a joke. I thought I was in control of it. And that kind of changed when I got introduced to cocaine and then heroin. So cocaine was what led me to first steal and compromise my morals. And I remember the day I tried cocaine, my friend who gave it to me was like, "No, Jed, this isn't like weed. This isn't like other drugs." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever, man,
I've heard, but yeah, I can handle anything, right?"
Yeah, exactly. You just don't, dare does not prepare you for what happens.
Yes.
So that was the first time I stole and compromised my morals, and it was enough for my parents to realize that I had a serious problem and to send me to an inpatient treatment center. So there was a waiting list for that one. It was about 4 months. So in that 4 months, I was like, I need to get it all out of my system. I need to try every drug because it's over with in my mind. And heroin was on that list, but I wasn't going to shoot it up. That was my line in the sand. And I found some people that had heroin, and when they got it for me, they were like, "Why don't you just shoot it up?" And I was like, "Okay." And so I just let them. It was they really.
Why don't you cross that line? All right, fine.
Yeah, they really.
It's a real hard
my
line
arm on that one. So they did, and by the time I got to that treatment center, I was full blown heroin addict, and I definitely needed to go. So that was really when. That was only the beginning of the serious decades of.
Sure.
Yeah.
So before we get into the deep dive, when you were like experimenting with some of the lighter stuff, did you feel like there were benefits to that outside of just, I'm having a good time? Like, people who don't typically do drugs don't see how you could come to a conclusion that this has a benefit that, something like alcohol or cigarettes doesn't have.
Yeah, so there was a couple pieces to that. So in my town, drinking was the socially accepted thing. I was a horrible drinker. I couldn't handle my liquor, and I couple that with a need to be accepted, and I don't like being made fun of. It's kind of the idea of like, I'll just go to the extreme. So be like, "Oh, you're drinking beer? Well, I'm snorting Coke," just to like look down. Like this was literally my mindset. And with the hallucinogens and like mushroom and ecstasy back then when it was really good, the benefits were just the feelings. I mean, it was just like the term is a psychonaut. I was just exploring my
Sure.
mind and
Had you been diagnosed
spirituality.
with anything before that? Any mental issues?
Yeah, generalized at that time it was like generalized anxiety. I was diagnosed with Tourette's at that time because so in sixth grade it was my first big trauma, which was just that we moved and prepubescent, didn't fit in, and my anxiety got so bad that I had facial tics where I would I would breathe out of my nose constantly and I would blink in a very like twitchy way,
Sure.
and I got made fun of it, and it just fueled the anxiety. And so I had Tourette's back then and depression and anxiety. So yes, it was also self-medicating for sure at the beginning.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on like self-medication? Do you think that things should be experimented with, or should we just leave that entirely up to professionals?
Well, I mean, they call it a practice for a reason. It literally is.
Sure.
And I work in the field, but I will be the first to admit, I mean, a lot of it is throwing shit to the wall and seeing what sticks.
Sure.
It's not a precise thing. I think I did a lot of damage that could have been avoided in my self-medicating. To sum it up, I will say as an adult, if you're making informed, educated decisions, that's one thing. As a teenager, I think it is really a big mistake.
Sure.
And you'll do a lot more harm than you're going to do good. I kind of think that with medication, though, too. It kind of goes hand in hand. I think I got medicated maybe a little too early. But who knows? I mean, I was on medicine when I was 11, I think, on like a pretty heavy duty antipsychotic at 11 years old, and that may have been a little too soon.
Sure. Yeah. Gotcha. So let's continue on down your dark path a little bit. As you progressed deeper into, the heavier stuff, what were kind of your experiences like in your relationships with your family and friends and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I grew up as a background, as I grew up Christian, right? Very much so. I had a lot of belief. I had a lot of faith. I also had a lot of fear.
Were you one of them Pentecostals?
No, I was a Presbyterian, but in the deep South.
Gotcha.
So
Yep.
kind of close.
Does a lot of mental damage.
It does, and I didn't. Well, and it's I think a lot of it was my personality because I don't think it was what I was taught. I think it was what I heard, and those things were the specifics were sex is bad, sex is a sin.
Right.
Your desires are bad, your desires are a sin. God hates sin. You're a sinner. You will be punished. Be afraid. So that's what I carried.
I think we both kind of had similar experiences on that note. Like you just obsess over certain things. So I don't blame my parents for anything that they taught me.
Of course not.
I mean, it's just how my brain received things and processed through it. But
Yep, absolutely. And so what I found was drugs cover up those feelings of guilt very much because I had these desires. I was a blossoming teenage boy with urges all his own, but I had this guilt and I wanted to do these things, and drugs allowed me the freedom to do these things, like have the confidence to hook up with girls. Yep. And so after my first treatment, and when I, it is funny, a Bible verse that I think applies is just that one verse where it talks about if you bind up the strong man and then he comes back, he's going to bring 7 of his friends stronger than the first. And that's a very true line in addiction, in that like every time I would sober up and go back out, it was just 1,000 times worse. And so I really, I just turned 18. I was dating an older girl. I was in a band, a local metalcore band at the time, top of the world.
Weren't we all?
Yeah. And I was just going nuts, just shooting up heroin, shooting up cocaine. I moved out of my parents' house at their chagrin. Is that the word for that?
Sure, that works.
Yeah, that works.
We like to pretend like we know big words around here.
Yeah, I know words, indubitably. And I just wanted, I felt like I had lived a life that was so, I couldn't do a lot of things. And so this was the first time I was like, fuck that. I'm going to go do all the things, and I'm going to go live this imaginary life. The girlfriend had her dad's credit card. So we were just like living in this awesome apartment in Charleston, South Carolina, just shooting up cocaine and heroin and partying. And it quickly got awful. It got really awful. And so I had to, my parents were trying to plan a surprise intervention for me that kept being like, hey, we're going to go to Disney World. And I was like, no, we're not. I know your tricks.
That's the worst setup ever.
Right. But finally, I had enough, and I called my mom, and I was like, all right, I'm ready to go do something. And there was a long-term treatment center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so this is when I moved to Louisiana in 2005.
So I'm not good at math. About how many years was it that you were dealing with this before you fessed up to it?
That summer, that was just like 4 months when I was just like, it was just like a bender from hell.
Gotcha.
That time. So my using career stretched from 12 to 27.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was 2 weeks before Hurricane Katrina is when I moved to Louisiana. So that was an interesting
property value. You got to take advantage of the market.
I called my parents. I was like, "You sent me here to die. Like, how could you do that?"
Yep.
And so I had found out also that I had gotten hepatitis C from the first time I shot up, which was very after school, especially.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so there was like a kind of, so back then the treatment for hepatitis C was essentially a chemotherapy. It was something called ribavirin and Pegasus interferon, and it was an injection you gave yourself, and once a week, and for 3 days after that you felt like you had the flu. And a side effect of it was 1 in 10 patients committed suicide. So they that was an accepted side effect of this medicine.
You might get better, or you might die,
or you might kill yourself.
Who knows?
Yeah. So they put you on an antidepressant automatically, and it's a like year to 2 year long process. So so that was going on. So my head was not in the best place. And I'd been in treatment for about 11 months. A great treatment. I'm still friends with people from there to this day. Dirty Mike, who I've had on my podcast, was one of the people I was in there with. But yeah, so I got a home pass. I had a girlfriend in Baton Rouge, and I got a home pass to South Carolina, and I ended up hooking up with my ex girlfriend that I'd been using with in Charleston, and came back to Louisiana, didn't think anything of it. I got a call like 2 months later saying she was pregnant. And
geez, you're at all the after school specials, aren't you?
All of them. And so in my headspace, being 18, I could not handle it, and I pushed for her to have an abortion, and she did, which was probably like the most like devastating moment I've had in myself.
Sure.
That was like the Christian value. I thought I was a murderer.
Right.
Really, really, really fucked me up. And so obviously I relapsed after that. And that's when my journey of treatment center hopping really kind of started. So what would happen is I'd go to treatment. And if you relapse, my parents would call the treatment. Hey, what do we do? Send them back to rehab. And some people, so I started my journey. I'm a little different than others because I got sent off when I was 17. So I never had a job. I was never financially independent, any of that. So I was, kind of a ward of the state. If I wanted help from my parents, I had to do what they said. Mm-hmm. And also, some people can get away with, they can control their use a little bit. Every time I would go out and use drugs, it would end in these like horrendous catastrophes. The worst of which, so I'd done the in and out of treatment thing a couple times. And there was, I was seeing a psychiatrist. She put me on this medicine called Gabatril, ironically, because she thought it was the only thing that couldn't be abused. I found out that if you drink on it, proved you wrong. Gotcha. I found out that if you drink on it, you get ridiculously screwed up. And so I'll never forget this day. I was living with two girls that I'd met at a campus ministry. We were living on LSU, and so they were two nice church girls. Bless their hearts that I put them through this. So the night before, I had drank on that medicine and gotten really high, so I wasn't going to drink the next day, so logic would tell you just double the dose and it should work on its own, right? Sure, makes sense.
Sure.
So I did that. They asked me, hey, we're going to church. Do you want to come? I said, no, thank you. I have plans tonight, so I stayed home.
Yep.
I stayed at their house. I took the pills. I noticed the world was starting to shake, which I was unfamiliar with. And the last thing I remember was Man vs. Wild was on TV, and I remember a sideways view of that because I laid down on the couch, and that's the last thing I remember. What happened was it was on a white leather couch also. So the girls came home. The TV was up all the way. There was blood all over the apartment. And I was in a corner locked into a catatonic seizure state. My arms were in a posturing position. My eyes were rolled in the back of my head, and I was bleeding. So what had happened is I'd begun to have a seizure, and I hit my head on the table and then seizured blood all over the apartment, like just throwing blood all over the apartment.
The things you didn't see in the after-school specials.
The things you don't see in the after-school special.
Uh-huh.
And so I was in a coma for 4 days on that one. And they told my mom, if he wakes up, he'll be severely brain damaged. We don't expect him to. So that was the last thing I remember was Bear Grylls and Man vs. Wild. And then the next thing I remember, I woke up to, so in the intensive care unit, this is in Baton Rouge is very Catholic. They have a priest walking around praying over all the coma patients. I woke up as this priest was praying over me, which I'm sure scared him as much as it scared me. Because
this has never worked before.
Yeah. So, well, I thought I was dead. So, because I mean, I woke up in blurred vision. I don't know what had happened, and all I see is a man with a collar, a priest collar, and I remember seeing two women. I remember them being female figures on either side of him. So, the only thing confirmed is that the pastor was there. I've never gotten any confirmation from anyone if there were two other figures there. Who knows? And I just remember bursting into tears, and I thought I was dead. And he was like, no, you're alive. So that's how I woke up.
Wow.
The thing, and so most people would say, well, surely that was it, right? Like, no, the problem with my overdoses is I don't remember them. It's a very different experience. I don't remember the pain. I don't remember seeing my mom cry. I don't remember any of that. For me, it was just I had all these people worried about me, like coming up to me, like, are you okay? It was a lot of attention. That's kind of it. I didn't see how fucked up of a thing it is to do to your loved ones and family members, right? So I went back to treatment. Got out of treatment, relapsed, did this dance. And so finally, when I was around 23, I was like, look, I am tired of this. My whole life, y'all have told me that I'm a drug addict. I don't even think it's a disease. I think y'all are full of shit. I think it's only a problem because y'all make it a problem. If you would just let me drink, things would be okay. I had a prescription to Suboxone and Xanax and Adderall, which I was selling on the side. So I was financially independent for the first time. And so I just called my mom and I was like, look, I'm going to drink and you just need to be okay with that. I don't need your money anymore. So there that is. So that started, I tested out and not believing in God. Also, I was like, I don't You know, I keep praying to be delivered from this thing. It's not happening.
Right.
All these other people have these normal lives. They drink. Nothing bad happens to them. Why me? I just don't think you're real. And this led, so my 2-year testing out of the freedoms led to me discovering crystal meth. So Suboxone is a maintenance medication you take that makes it so you can't get high on other opiates. It's kind of like similar to methadone.
Okay.
So I wasn't, shooting heroin, but then I started crystal meth, and like any good meth head, I also started selling guns, stolen guns. And what happened was I also developed a crippling gambling addiction at this time, because the crystal meth scene in Louisiana, all the tweakers congregated at the casinos because they're open 24 hours. You get free alcohol and you can geek out on the slot machines, and it's very conducive to a horrible demonic lifestyle.
Sure.
So what happened was I was trying to, and they also cash checks. So I was trying to cash a bad check at the casino. It wasn't working. I didn't know what I was going to do. I looked down and there was a valet ticket on the ground, and I was like, okay, sweet. Mm-hmm. So I grabbed the valet ticket. I went upstairs. I handed the valet person the ticket, and they handed me some car keys, and I was like, all right, sweet. So I get into a Dodge 2500 dually, bright red, with a giant Insane Clown Posse vinyl sticker on the back. And I drive away. And
just
as soon as I
shot, man.
Oh God, yes. As soon as I drove away, I was like, what are you going to do with the car, Jed? Like, you didn't think this one through. So I drove it across the street, left the keys in it, and walked home. All right. And I thought that was that. So fast forward 2 months, and I'm selling guns. I'm selling meth. This particular Sunday morning, I had security cameras set up. I was prepared, but I had cleaned all of my guns. My safe was open with all my drugs, and there's a knock at the door, and I was like, okay, customer number one. And I opened the door, and there's a very large police officer standing there, and I go, oh, and I tried to shut the door. He reaches in, he handcuffs me, and at that period of time, I was carrying pistols on me at all times for some reason, So he turned around to handcuff me and said, "Holy shit!" Mm-hmm. And this is, and I went to jail. And he goes, "Do you remember stealing a car from a casino?" And I was like, "Oh, shit!" Like, that's what this is about.
Oh, that's all it is. Sure, let's go.
Yeah. Well, and then he
just don't look in the closet.
Yeah, he did. He looked.
Yeah.
So I found myself for the first time I had made it 23 years without going to prison, and that was over with. And my mom would later tell me that she like a week beforehand, she had been woken up in the middle of the night, and she felt like God was telling her, "You need to let him go." Mm-hmm. And so she prayed that, like, okay, I'm giving him to you. And shortly after that, I got arrested. This was also one of the darkest times in my life. I thoroughly believe if I didn't get arrested, I would have died. I was doing meth and lots of research hallucinogens. I regularly put pistols in my mouth. I was hearing voices. I was writing scrawled messages all across my apartment. We shot guns in my apartment. Like, it was I lived above a witch. Like, it was a really seriously dark time in my life. Right. That was not going to end well.
Movie quality stuff.
Yeah, but that is horrible in practice. Like, in real life, it's terrifying.
Don't try this at home. Yes.
Yeah. So I was in a East Baton Rouge parish prison. That was awful. That's kind of all there is to say about that. That was the worst experience of my entire life. And I refound God in there, which oftentimes people do. I had a few very, very intense spiritual experiences, enough that I felt like reborn. I had a renewed motivation to stay sober. this was the first time in my life that I felt like God actually did supernaturally remove the desire to use drugs from me. I did not want to use drugs ever again. I got out of prison and went to a sober living house. And instead of maintaining that, I was very arrogant about it. I was like, I'm good. I don't need to go to meetings. I don't need to do this or that. And I started I was sleeping around, and I developed a really serious pornography addiction for the first time in my life.
Hey, if you made it that long, then, you at least, you missed that boat that everybody else was on. You just skipped straight to meth instead.
Right. So, yeah, I found that I was sober, sure, but I was doing all these other morally compromising things that I knew were wrong. And so the guilt was starting to crop back up in my life. And, it was only a matter of time. I remember I tried to help get my friend sober. He came in and he introduced me to Kratom, which is a legal opioid that's gaining popularity lately. I didn't know what it was at the time. I thought it was nothing to be worried about, and we both got physically addicted to Kratom. We did that for a few months. They found out, they kicked us out, and I went and we went to a bar the next day, and I ordered a beer, and I didn't even drink the beer. I said, who am I kidding? And I just called my heroin dealer, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to play this game. We're just going to go straight to a 100. And that started there we go again. That started the last 3 years. In that 3 years, I tried to commit vehicular suicide. I drank a bunch of GHB, and I just went driving, and I hit 2 parked cars at a red light going 50 miles an hour with no brakes, just smashed into them. I walked away with it with nothing. I got rearrested, went to a number of more treatment centers. It just got slowly. I'm getting older. Nobody wants to mess with me anymore. My friends are dropping off. People are dying. It's moved past any kind of fun into just a whole just addiction. I'm doing things I never thought I would do. I was overdosing constantly. And so I met my current wife during this time. We ended up relapsing together. We went to rehab together about 3 times. And the last time what finally happened was that nothing happened. It was just, we were both homeless. We would wake up, go, fly a cardboard sign by the interstate, begging for money. We would get enough money to put gas in the car we were living in. We would drive to Walmart. We would steal Blu-rays. We would drive to FYE. We would sell them. We would go buy dope, and then we would go back to the interstate and just do that. And it was awful.
The American dream.
Yeah. Living the dream. I had completely lost my connection to God, which was the scariest thing. I remember one day it clicked that I had not prayed in like months, and I tried to, and I was like unable to, and it was a very surreal, terrifying feeling. So my wife went to treatment before I did, and on August 24th, 2014, I had my last overdose. This is right when like the fentanyl thing was kicking off. And I was driving my car, I guess, because they found me in the middle of the road in my car out. And I had my heroin on the gear shift, and a police officer got in my car and moved it off the road. So he literally had to, put it in gear.
Yeah.
But either he didn't see the heroin or he just had mercy on me, and I didn't get any charges. So that was my sign. I was like, okay, it's time to do something. And so I went back to treatment again. This time with the help of nobody cared. My parents hadn't talked to me in a long time.
Yeah.
It was like, if you want to get sober, do it on your own. And that's what I did. And Yeah, so that was September 23rd, 2014. Yeah, it was the last time I went to treatment. I've been sober since then.
Congratulations. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Hey, Dan Smots here. I'm taking a second to interrupt myself talking to talk about myself because, I don't get paid a penny for the hours and hours that I put into creating this show for you guys in your greedy little ears, and I've got a family to feed. To make that happen, I run my own media business called Goulash Media. If you have a need in anything from video production to graphic design to audio production and beyond, you can get it all for a painfully fair price at Goulash Media. In video, I do weddings, music videos, commercials, pageants, plays, etc., etc., etc. For design, I do photo editing, album art, logos, branding, business cards, merchandise, you name it. For audio, I do engineering, production, editing, jingles, and, well, podcasts. So if you've got a media need of any kind, or if you'd just like to give a little something back and help keep my children fed, check out all the endless options at my website, goulashmedia.net. That's goulash, Goulash, media.net, where we cater to the little guy with the big vision. Okay.
So what made this time stick? I mean, up to this point, what's been different?
Man. So it's a, large part I just attribute to God and maintaining me when I couldn't do it myself. And then beyond that, it's just doing simple things. So I fully dove into AA. I joined a men's book study. I joined a church. I played in the church band. I connected myself. I was still on probation, so that helped. What happened with my charges was that I had a 10-year deferred sentence. So if I screwed up again, I was going to go do 10 years. So that was a good motivator.
Sure.
I just did the simple things. I was really done at that point too. Like I really, really was. So I was very desperate, and I lived in a sober living house for 9 months. I worked a minimum wage job for 6, and I just made being sober my whole job, man. Me and my girlfriend at the time, we went into couples therapy. We didn't live together until we got married. I just tried to do everything. It's like I'd been trained. I knew what to do. I just never done it.
Yeah.
And so I just did it finally. Yeah.
Simple as that. Yeah.
It really was. It's been easy. It's been, last year was probably my hardest year. I started my job as a substance abuse counselor at an adolescent treatment facility, which is really rewarding and really difficult. I've lost a lot of friends this last year, and it's my second year married. So, life is getting real. It's been challenging, but yeah, I think 2019 is going to be a good one.
Yeah, for sure. So you've been doing this podcast for about, 2-3 years, something like that?
Yep, this is year number 3.
Okay. So you basically started doing the podcast, 2-3 years after finally getting sober.
Yep.
Did you have any concern about, maybe it's too soon to start being the guy who speaks with authority about this type of thing when?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, it was partially a built-in thing. It was one more thing in between me and using as well. It was like,
Sure.
I'm literally putting myself out there to the world to hold me accountable.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's like, I already knew up front that I wouldn't be able to lie if I relapsed. Like,
Sure.
I just couldn't do it. And, we became friends with another recovery podcast, Dopey, and, I was good friends with both of their hosts, and one of the hosts recently relapsed and overdosed and died. And so that was a reality check. But no, I mean, if you've got a month sober, you know how to stay sober a month, so you have valuable experience.
Sure.
So that's kind of the thing. You owe it to other people that are struggling to share your experience. It's a duty.
Right on. Gotcha. Now, do you? I don't know exactly where you stand politically, but we do talk a lot about libertarian concepts on this show. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on on legalization or like decriminalization of some of these substances, do you think that it would be? I've always said, but I didn't go through the same shit that you went through. But I've always said that I think that this stuff should be legalized, and if our tax dollars are going to something, it shouldn't be locking people in cages. It should be helping people, be educated on the effects of these things and helping them recover rather than throwing them away. Do you agree with that, or do you have a different stance as somebody who's gone through it?
Yes, no, I think I believe in legalization, just strictly because the war on drugs is a objective failure. The prison system is unbelievably corrupt and racially biased, and they are not interested in rehabilitating drug offenders. I don't know how something like that would work in as big a country as the U.S. I look at the Portugal model where they've legalized everything, and the 10-year study came back. It's doing well over there. I'm for safe injection sites. The idea of the arguments against legalization just aren't good for me. If alcohol is going to be legal, then weed should as well, and other things should as well, because alcohol is the single most deadly drug in existence. It's the only one that can cause cancer to every part of the body that it touches. Like it's so incredibly hypocritical to me. So that's really my stance, is that like if these things are going to be legal, if Adderall and Xanax and opiates are going to be, technically legal, their prescription, then like who are you to put people in prison for a plant?
Sure.
Like,
right. But as I'm listening to your story, you said that, one of the main things that shook you out of your funk and got you able to, stick to sobriety was the fear of being, facing a 10-year sentence. So
that's true.
I don't know. I mean, if heroin was legal tomorrow and you could buy it at the local gas station, would you be more likely to relapse or not? I'm playing devil's advocate here because
no. Well, so the prison sentence was for crime that I committed. So if you commit a crime for a drug, then yes, you deserve to go to prison.
Sure.
And just answer the second thing, I can totally go down to the gas station and buy some heroin. Like right now, I know exactly where to go get it. Sure. That's the other the other fallacy is that just because it's illegal, it means like. I think my prediction would be there would be a honeymoon period where there might be some new users.
Sure.
And then it would level off back to, it's like, would you do heroin if it was legal?
Good question. I would like to say that I would like to say, yeah, I might try it, but I'd be okay. That thought process that our type have. But, I mean, hearing the stories, I would probably steer clear of that in particular and stuff to that magnitude. But
I guess I'll say I'm in favor of decriminalization.
Sure,
that's what I don't think we should go back to. I think our society's too set up in a way against it that if we can't just all of a sudden be like, all right, Johnson & Johnson heroin, go buy it. I don't think that would work out very well. But decriminalization, if you should have the right, because it really is just killing people. So many people, if they had access to safe chemicals, like. I don't believe people deserve to die because they wanted to try drugs. Like that's what, and the people that are decrying drug addicts while they sip a Budweiser can go fuck themselves. Like,
yeah,
for real.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're a better American if you drink a 12-pack of Bud Light every night, but if you try crack once, you're an addict for life.
Yeah. Right. I mean, look at caffeine, look at nicotine, look at cocoa, look at I mean, we are a nation. Sugar, good Lord, don't give me. Yeah, I do love sugar, but we're a nation. We are a species that loves chemicals, man. It's just the whole, the war on drugs just really. And if you're gonna make something illegal, give me a good reason.
Sure.
Give me a good reason. There we go. Like, you know.
No victim, no crime. But so would you? Well, do you ever have like any trouble not relapsing at this point? Do you ever feel the urge to jump back in?
Oh yeah, I don't think that'll ever go away.
Sure.
It does not have the teeth that it used to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I love drugs. I loved getting high. It was who I was for a large portion of my life.
Yeah.
I've retrained my brain. I mean, I've experienced dopamine releases that should not be felt by humans because we can't handle them. Like my brain's going to remember that shit, especially shooting up. I mean, it's very, putting creamer in coffee sometimes triggers me because it looks like blood registering in a syringe. Belts trigger me. When I go to the gym and I see people's veins bulging out, that triggers me. But it's different. Like I said, It doesn't have the teeth it does. And I just have to, that's why I still go to meetings. That's why I'm a counselor partially, because it reminds me of where I don't want to be again. The people I see relapse forget. They think that they can drink a beer. They think that they can smoke a joint. For me, I've just tried that. I've tried it. I've tried that experiment so many times, and I just can't do it successfully.
Yeah. Right on. So would you agree with the statement, once an addict, always an addict?
Yes. For me. I'll speak for me. Yes. You can't make a cucumber out of a pickle.
Gotcha. Do you think that applies for anybody who's an addict, or do you think that term is pretty blanketed?
So if you are a real deal alcoholic addict, yes, that applies. The issue that has cropped up lately is little Johnny smokes a joint, mom freaks out, sends him to treatment. Treatment tells little Johnny that you are an addict and an alcoholic. That statement may not be true. And then, what little Johnny then has to do to stay sober is different than a true blue alcoholic. Little Johnny can drink a beer every now and then and be okay.
Right.
And if I start to think that I am like him, I'm in trouble.
Sure.
So yes, with the qualifier that if you have whatever this is, if you don't want to call it a disease, whatever, it's definitely something, then yes, I've given up my right to chemical peace of mind.
Yeah, gotcha. So do you have any words out there for the little Johnnies or the little Jeddies who are going through this shit at this point?
Yeah. If you need help, if you need someone to talk to, if you have any questions, email me, churchandotherdrugs@gmail.com. I'll respond immediately. Be safe. It's not the same game it was anymore. The chances of you dying are exponentially higher. We are in the middle of a crisis right now, and it doesn't matter what you're using. People are using pill presses to turn fentanyl into Xanax, into it's in cocaine now. It's just simply not the same game anymore. I would caution your experimentation if you are young. Your brain's, the prefrontal cortex isn't done developing until you're around 24, 23, 25. Really just, watch yourself. Look out for your friends. Don't use alone. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. And just be careful. It's a different world than even when I was doing it 10 years ago.
Do you think we need to change the DARE slogan from like dare to keep kids off drugs to like dare to not freaking kill yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Like teach them harm reduction. Teach them, Narcan is now available at over the counter at Walgreens. Narcan is a opioid overdose reversal drug. All right, you can get it in a nasal spray or an injection. Educate yourself on that. If you have any friends that use opiates, if you know, just keep it on hand. It literally, it has saved my life and it saved other people's lives. Deaths are avoidable. You know, just educate yourself. Don't be swayed by like fear mongering. If people can't be honest about what they're doing or what they want to do, then that's how people die.
Right. Absolutely. So on that note, do you, probably even more importantly, do you have words of wisdom for family members and parents and stuff that are watching their loved ones go through this?
God, that's the hardest question and the question I get all the time. It's going to be the most difficult thing you go through. And I guess my biggest advice is to learn how to not enable your loved one, how to not protect them from consequences. You need to let them fall. Short of letting them die, you need to let them experience consequences. And you need to not enable them. There's something called Al-Anon. If you are a family member or a spouse or whatever of someone dealing with addiction, those are the meetings that are for you guys, and they'll help teach you how to be okay no matter what your loved one does. And yeah, I mean, just, you know, hold on tight, pray for them, just learn how to help them in a healthy way. Never give them cash. That's the number.
Right on. Well, cool, man. So if you don't have any final thoughts or anything, we can you can go ahead and plug your show, let everybody know where they can find out more information about you and your podcast and all that.
Sure, yeah. So we're Church and Other Drugs. You can find us on Facebook. Don't really use Twitter that much anymore. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, wherever you can find podcasts. Church and Other Drugs. You can email us at churchandotherdrugs@gmail.com. We have a Patreon with tons and tons of bonus content. Patreon.com/churchandotherdrugs. You can, I'm always answering Facebook messages and emails. If you have any questions, if you have any, if you need advice, whatever, if I can't help you, I'll make sure I find somebody that can.
Very cool. Well, awesome, man. It's been an absolute blast having you on, and I hope to do it again in the very near future. I feel like we've got, like I said, a lot in common, and your story is a fascinating one and very important to put out there, so I applaud you for the transparency, and I think we need more Jed Paynes in the world. So keep it up, man, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, buddy.
Hey guys, thanks for sticking around to the end. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jed Payne as much as I did. Jed is an awesome guy. I always love having him on. He was on last week's episode of Anti-News as well, and I've been on his show, and, you know, we just have a lot in common. He's a great guy to chat with, super chill and down to earth, which is really cool. I think especially the Christian community really benefits a lot from people like Jed who are willing to just open up and lay it all out on the table and be honest about the stuff that they've gone through and the ways that they've overcome them. I think it's lacking a lot in the Christian, I guess community is the word. And I think we need more of that. I think we need more just transparency, because we're all people trying to figure this shit out together, and not being honest is kind of defeating the purpose. So, in keeping in that vein of thought, Jed and I did a bonus episode that you can get in the Downers Club, where I opened up about some of the mental issues that I've been struggling with lately, and some of the ways that I have self-medicated my way through them, and the ways that I'm still working on them now. I'm totally open, willing to talk about them. I wouldn't have been in the past, but life's too short to give a shit about that type of thing. So if you want to hear my story about that type of stuff, Jed and I broke that down for, I think we did about a full hour bonus episode. You can get that over in the Downers Club, and you can support the show as well by doing that. You can sign up for that for as little as a cup of coffee a month by going to patreon.com/thesystemisdown. And yeah, you'll get a weekly bonus, usually multiple weekly bonus episodes of the show. When we do the Anti-News, we also do an after party where we extend that out and talk more about what's going on in the world. If you're not familiar with Anti-News, that's the second weekly show that we do on this podcast, where Craig and I unabashedly break down things that are happening in the world. We basically pull up news articles and we make fun of them together. And we have guests on sometimes, like Jed, and we've had Tom Dunn on, and we're planning on having more guests on in the future. But we just, we give you information. If you don't like digging into the news, but you kind of want to know what's going on, that's the place for you, because we don't get too deeply into things. We mostly just say, hey, this happened this week, and then we make jokes about it, and we get a little bit dark and offensive. But, if that's your cup of tea, definitely go check that out. Antinewslive.com is the place for that, or you can find it in whatever streaming service or feed service you're listening to this show in. But yeah, I was talking about the Downers Club there first. One of the things that we do there is you'll get the extended episodes of Anti-News that we call the After Party. And you can join the Downers Club and be a part of a nice, fun, tightly knit community of weirdos who like talking civilly about strange things in the world, the conspiracies, the politics, the religion, and whatnot by going to patreon.com/The System Is Down. A whole bunch of perks over there, different levels that you can sign up for, so definitely check that out. Also, if you want to, just expand your horizons a little bit more and chat with some of the people that listen to this show. If you want to be a part of the free community, you can do that by going to tsidpod.com/forum and joining the System Is Down forum. It's currently on Facebook, as long as Facebook allows, and as long as Facebook doesn't start, monitoring our shit and, blocking things. So far, so good. So if you're on Facebook, you can go join that forum. You can also find it just by looking up the System Is Down forum and asking to join. It is a closed forum, so I'll have to approve you. But if you look like a human, just ask. I'll do a quick look through your page, make sure you look real, and let you right in there. So yeah, that's cool. Like I said, it's just a place for weirdos to talk about weird things and do so in a civil manner. So, what else? Also, we're on all the platforms, all the main platforms: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, all those. So, if you're new, go find The System Is Down, look us up, give us follows, likes, shares, subscribes, all those things. We're also on some of the edgier forums, the things that are lesser knowns, like Gab and Minds, YouTube, stuff like that. So we are pretty much anywhere that you can socialize on the interwebs. So go find us, share us. If you don't like the main stuff, we are on the lesser knowns. And if you want us to be on something new, if you know about something that we're not on, hit me up, shoot me an email, dan@tsidpod.com. That goes straight to me. Let me know where you want me to be, where you want us to post. If you don't want to join these other platforms, if you're on a different platform, I'm all about it. I'll go post the same shit in there, and you can get access to that as well, wherever you are most comfortable. So, also, I know I'm rambling a little bit, but go out and share the show with a friend this week. Get into a conversation. Have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody. Be civil, be open, be honest, be raw and real. Life is short. Know people and be real with them. That's it. If there's a point to life, I gotta think that that's probably it. Try to figure this stuff out together. If there's a God in heaven, I have a hard time thinking he's going to have a problem with you asking questions and trying to figure out what the meaning of life is. I have a hard time thinking that he's going to not understand your queries. And, that's it. So go out and socialize, be real with people, and be vulnerable. But, know what you believe and why you believe it and why you think the way you do. And listen to other people as they do the same. And that's kind of the point of this show. As I always say, we're here to try and change the world one uncomfortable conversation at a time. We are the place where you come if you're offended by all the people who are offended by things. If you're sick of all the PC bullcrap and all the nonsense, all the hate that's going on in the world, come on over here, bring a friend, and if you're civil, we'll be civil right back. No matter what you believe, what you think on theology, faith, politics, or conspiracies, or anything. If you're open-minded, this is the place for you. And of course, if you'll have me, I will be right back here first thing next Monday morning, nestled into your little ear canal like a hibernating bear in this cold, cold winter. And I'll be bringing you some more uncomfortable conversations. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, continue to share the show. Continue to help this thing grow. Let's be a part of this together. Question everything. Stay uncomfortable. And I'll talk to you then. Thanks.
This has been a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.